Wondering how to fall completely in love with the people and things that surround you at home? I've spent the last 15 years studying how and where families thrive and what relational and house characteristics ignite us with that homey feeling. On this podcast, we uncover how our brains process the people we live with and the houses we live in so we can confidently create our homes to be wonder-filled connection magnets. Ready to give up the decision fatigue, comparison hives, overwhelm ulcers, and confusion chaos? You are in the right place. I'm your host, Carly Thornock. Welcome to Becoming Home. Hey homies, how you doing? Today we're going to be talking about optimizing storage at home, how to do it, why we want to do it, why we even care. This is a question I get so often from my clients and my students. They're asking me, how much do I keep? And do I really need to follow a set of rules? Is this an intuitive thing? I don't really know where to go. I'm feeling overwhelmed by all of my stuff. How do I know what to store, what to chuck, what to use, what to keep? Like, how do I make sense of all of this? Has this ever been you? If so, you are in the right place. Okay, so I have a couple of guidelines here when it comes to deciding what to store. Now, we're not talking about things that you use routinely. And this is not the bookshelves in your living room. This is not the clothes that go in your closet. This is what's going to go in the attic, what's going to go in the garage, what's going to go in the storage unit. This is the next level away storage. I love storage because don't you feel like it's so powerful to have a really robust storage system? Don't you feel like when you have enough food to last you for a little while in between Costco runs that you are like living the high life? We always joke that my husband Chase, he always feels really secure if we have like a year's supply of AA batteries. I always feel really secure if we have a year's supply of maple syrup. Like we just have these little things that we like to store, makes us feel happy. Now, storage space. I have lived in very small places. Right now, we are currently living in a 258 square foot camper trailer that we have glammed out, and this office, which is in my shipping container. So as we are building our house out on the ranch, we have very small space. Itty bitty living space, right? And I have never felt more on top of what I keep, more on top of the things that I own, more aware of my possessions, and I've never been a better steward, in my opinion. And this has come from a few things. The first thing is I've become crystal clear about what I need, what is needed, and what is wanted. I don't plan for contingencies that are outside of the like one standard deviation of my daily needs. So what I mean by that is I don't keep things for the reason of what if I might use this someday. It's not a good enough reason for me. I have to know exactly when I'm going to use it. And that thing, in order to be stored, in order for me to keep it, it needs to be once a month. Because our living is so constrained, like even in this shipping container, we have half office, half like storage. If I'm not looking at going through physically touching things once a month, it cannot be here. I do not have space for it. Now, if you are in a big house or if you are in an apartment with a little bit more storage, I would say that this is a 1-year rule of thumb. So these are things like Christmas decorations or like the summer welcome mat or these seasonal things that we store. If you're using it once a year, it makes sense. Like you're not going to buy Christmas stockings new every single year, probably. You're not going to buy new Christmas ornaments. They're just things that you want to store for up to a year. You may not be making a Thanksgiving turkey once a month, but you do use your big platter every Thanksgiving without fail. It's worth it to you to keep. Okay, so this is our number one recommendation. The number one way to optimize storage at home is only keep things that you are physically touching and interacting with once a year maximum. Now, if you're in a smaller space like me, this is once a month. If I have not seen, touched, kissed, loved something for longer than a month, it cannot be here. Okay. Number 2 rule is designate a space for storing something before you designate the number of keeps you're allowed. So For instance, if I am determining how much wheat to put up for the winter? How many cans of pumpkin that I'm going to can, right? How many jars? I need to designate a space, and then I count how many jars I can fit in that space, and that is the number that I produce, versus saying, I have 67 jars of pumpkin. I got to find somewhere to put them. You can do that, of course, but then you get creative and you end up making your bookshelves out of pumpkin because you have nowhere else to put them. A great rule of thumb to keep yourself organized and to keep your head in the game with the things that you have is to decide ahead of time what you need and what you want, and then fulfill those prescriptions. This is how we approach anything in the house. We decide what we need, and then we find the right thing to fulfill that need. I need a sofa that is 87 by 105, and it's going to be a sectional, and it's going to look and feel like this, and then we go find the thing. Very seldom do we just peruse around and say like, oh, I like that sectional, I'll just bring it home and put it somewhere. Hopefully I find somewhere to put it, because then it's not a fit for you. You haven't decided ahead of time that you want it. It's backwards. It's putting the cart before the horse. So the same thing applies to your long-term storage. If you don't see it in a year, it doesn't belong. And if you don't have a specific spot for it, then that's not going to work. So for instance, I decide I want 3 bins of Christmas storage. And then once I have filled 3 bins full of Christmassy things, I'm done. You can always reevaluate and say, I'd like to add another bin. How am I going to shuffle things around? I would like 4 bins. I have decided ahead of time. But when you're Target aisle 12, looking at all the fancy Christmas things, when you're at the Christmas market, this is not the time to be like, oh, I'll just figure it out later. I'm going to buy all the things and then I'll figure out later where to store it. And I feel like my husband, if he's listening to this, will be like, Carly, y'all should take some of your own medicine. Because that inspiration can be really strong and really compelling. And especially if you're a soul-led person where you love that feeling of inspiration, that feeling of flexibility, that feeling of making it work, this can be so compelling to us. I include myself in this category. And this is what my husband would laugh at. But when we tell ourselves, I can have this many books and fill up this bookshelf, and at that point, I'm going to reassess and get rid of some books because I don't want to have books everywhere. I want books right here. Amazing. That's a great thing to do. That's a proactive approach to accumulating things. I want 3 Christmas bins. And once I've filled my Christmas bins, my 3 Christmas bins, I'll be done. Or I will intentionally reassess and I will make decisions ahead of time. I won't just bring home 500 bins worth of vinyl sticky things for my windows for Christmas and then try to find a place to put them. This is where clutter comes from, where we don't have a place to put things before we bring them into our home. This is where our garages, our attics, our storage units, they get really chaotic to our hearts because we have too much stuff and we don't have enough room to store it. So if you're like me and you're in a small place, that just means we get very few Christmas decorations unless you want to pre-plan a place to have them. So I'm not saying like everybody should only have 3 bins of Christmas. I'm saying decide ahead of time what that looks like for you and your family and how many bins you want to store and interact with often. Are there ways that you can use something for Christmas and for birthdays? Is there a product, candles maybe, that you could use Christmas and New Year and Valentine's and the candles come out? This is your festive trigger to the family of like, we're celebrating, we have the candles out, the festive candles versus the Santa Claus candles. You know what I mean? So this is a way that we can diversify and make something like a celebration box versus like a Christmas box or versus some specific St. Patrick's Day organization that ends up taking up space that we don't use that isn't super fulfilling to us. Okay, so number 1 rule, if you aren't using it more than once a year, it goes. Number 2, if you designate a space before you designate a number of keeps, you are going to be in for a world of rejoicing. Be generous to yourself. Be kind. You don't need to be stingy about it. Just be intentional. The sub rule here is Humans like to expand to fill the space they're given. So if you just say, this is my craft room, pretty sure like before you even turn around, there's going to be crafts from floor to ceiling. I want you to get specific and be like, this is where I'm storing all of my fabrics. I have room for this much fabric, this much thread, this much ribbon. And then that's how much you fill up, and you don't let yourself go over. This takes a lot of self-awareness and determination to really follow through with your goals. This is a big level of trust with yourself, and it's so fun. Okay, I have a third rule for you. The third rule is that when we're storing long-term in our garages and our attics and our storage containers, our storage units, use the same bins and label them well. I have a friend who has all of her same bins labeled with numbers, and she has a master sheet. So if she ever needs to go looking for something, she's like, oh, I'm looking for my photo albums. That's in bin number 10. They're all in order. She goes right to bin 10. She knows where they are. This is cool. I love that system. For me, I just like to write on a label, memorabilia, photo albums, but it's a little bit less organized. Now that I've learned from my friend, I'm totally on board. I'm going to redo my storage to be more like that. I think that's awesome. We want our bins to be accessible, and we want them to look uniform. This is going to say to our brains, this is the psychology part, right? This is going to say to our brains, everything is in its place. Everything is stackable. Everything is ordered. I can get what I need, and I'm not overwhelmed. Of course, just like any research, I want to reiterate that the psychological principle, the rule does not apply to everybody. So if you're somebody who's like, if I try to get matching bins, I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to be hung up on this perfectionist idea of everything matching and be so organized. I'm never going to take the first step. Kibosh it. Get the bins that you need. Do your very best. Take a stab at whatever action you can take today. And do it, my friend. You're going to learn in the process what feels good to you, and then you can always make adjustments. Okay, so let's review one more time. How you optimize your storage, your long-term storage at home, is you never keep anything that you don't look at least once a year. Number 2, you designate a space before you designate what you keep. And number 3, you have matching bins, matching labels in an accessible place. Now, there's one caveat that I want to throw in, and that is of memorabilia. I kind of touched on the topic of memorabilia, but this is what people always say, like, what about my wedding album? What about the kids' birth books? What about these things that I don't use once a year, but that I really care about, that are really important to me? And this kind of references like Swedish death cleaning mentality of, if you aren't using it once a year, if you aren't actively participating in with this object in your life regularly, if it's not going to make an appearance on a table at your funeral, then consolidate. Because if you aren't looking at your memorabilia at least yearly, you're not using it. You're not using it to remember. You're using it to clutter up your storage room. Okay, so memorabilia is not outside of these parameters. I want you to keep the memorabilia that you use and use the memorabilia that you have. Maybe this means getting pictures up on the walls from the bin. Maybe this means making a book and putting it on your shelves. Maybe this means going through and having a memorabilia day where once a year you just get out all of your bins and you go through it and you show your kids and your grandkids and you invite your friends over and you show them how great of a poet you were in 5th grade. Whatever it is that matters to you, use it, because that's why you keep it. If we leave these decisions to be made to our posterity when we pass on, they're not going to know what to do with it either, and it's going to end up in the trash anyway. We think like, oh, I'll just keep all my Boy Scout patches for posterity, but we don't actually think like, what's my posterity going to do with all my Boy Scout patches? This is up to you to figure out what you're going to do with your stuff. Make it into a shadow box. Take a picture of it and hand it out to your family and sign it and tell them why it's important to you. Keep one patch. Give everybody in your family one patch to sew on their backpacks. Whatever it is, like use the things you're saving to build relationships now. I can't tell you, like, when my grandpa was old and he just started getting rid of all this stuff. It was amazing. We'd go over to his house and he'd be like, well, Carly, what do you want? Do you need this? Do you need that? Come look at my files. I have a poem for you that like literally a poem for 5th grade that I'm going to give to you. I loved that. I loved having this little piece of my grandpa that he had saved for me. And that was fun. And it was great to not have to make those decisions after he was gone. He just made those decisions for us of, I want you to have this. I want you to have this. I'm speaking my will. I'm giving it away right now. And as young people who probably aren't facing the end of our lives at this very moment, as we're young, let's make those decisions ahead of time so we don't have to carry stuff around on our shoulders in our storage rooms for potentially 70 more years, not using it. Just to lug from one house to the next. Our memorabilia is important and it's incredible. So let's use it or let's lose it. All right. With that in mind, you guys go make a mess. I hope that you get your house all organized and I hope that your storage rooms are super messy on their way to becoming a little bit less overwhelming for you. All my love. See you next week. Hey, thanks for listening today. If you love what you're hearing, share this episode with a friend who you want to chat with about it. Also, leave a review for the show so we can reach more soulful mamas looking to love the magical humanity that surrounds them at home. If you really are digging this scene, come check out The Knowing, the inner circle for confident home creating. Find all the info about it as well as a full transcript of this episode over at carlythornock.com.